All right, it is 5:31. I'm going to call this meeting, special meeting of the Champaign County Board to order. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Cowart, Crane, Esri,
Here.
Farney,
Here.
Fava,
Here.
Furtado, Greer, Hanauer Friedman,
Here.
Lakshin,
Here.
Pugh,
Present.
Rodriguez, Rogers, Sexton, Storr,
Present.
Solard,
Here. Here.
Vanich Theranot,
Here.
Wiggs,
Here.
Wilson,
Here.
Cagle,
Here.
Carter, Locke.
Here.
We have a quorum. Could the clerk please read the notice of the meeting?
Notice is hereby given that a special meeting of the County Board of Champaign County, Illinois will convene on February 25th, 2025 at 5:30 p.m. in the Brookins Administrative Center, 1776 East Washington Street in Urbana, Illinois, in said county, Illinois, for the purpose of considering budget amendments from the Circuit Clerk's Office in fiscal year 2024 and any other business pending before the Board, which said meeting shall continue in session from day to day until the completion of said business.
Thank you. Approval of the agenda, please. All right, Ed with motion, second with Eric. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you. Public participation. Seeing no public wishing to address the board, we'll move on. Board communications. Ellie.
Just really quick, I'm on the Policy Council for Head Start, which met yesterday, and I just wanted to quickly share an update because I know there's been a lot of concern about their funding given everything that's going on. And they shared that while there have been staff who've lost their positions in the federal office, they also just lost their regional liaison, who's based in Chicago, was on probation and therefore was let go. But at this point, they don't foresee any direct impact to their staff and the programming here in Champaign County.
Any further communications? Seeing none, we'll move on. New business. Adoption of Resolution 2025-65, Budget Transfer BUA 2024-12-13-21, Fund 1080, General Corporate, 2617, Child Support Service, 2630, Circuit Clerk Operation and Admin, and 2671, Court Document Storage, Department 030, Circuit Clerk, amount $355,154.31. Reason interfund transfers to match revenues received by the Circuit Clerk. The record note that Member Greer is with us. Do I have a motion? Motion from Mr. Farney. Second. Second from Ellie. We have a motion and a second. Discussion. Any discussion? Chris?
Hi, I understand that the circuit clerk is present and may wish to speak to the issue that we're under discussion.
Well, if people have specific questions, she can certainly come to the mic if there are questions.
Mr. Executive, are you denying me the right to speak to the board on this issue?
I'm not denying you the right to speak, but this is the county board meeting, and if they have questions, they can certainly ask you to come to the microphone. And I think Mr. Storr has just raised his hand. Okay. Chris?
Thank you. I was looking through a document that you left at our desk here, and I'm concerned about the mention that the transfer of funds would not leave you with sufficient funds to address the digitization needs. I have been kind of confused about this issue for some time, and would you care to elucidate what your opinion is of this matter?
Thank you, Member Store. First, I did place something at each desk of the board members this evening just to give some further information about this process, including Mr. Soar's question about digitization, which I can finally say now without stumbling all over it. Basically, the digitization process is something that I actually presented to the executive staff during our budget proposals for FY25. This year, we were told to present a flat budget for the office and then to separately present a proposal for any other projects that we might wish for the office to take on during fiscal year 25. So in my separate presentation about a project that we would want to do during fiscal year 25, I presented the issue of digitization. In the memo, I talk about the fact that I actually have approached the Administrative Office of the Illinois Courts 3 times now, asking for funds for that particular project, because it's big enough to where this will not be a project that can be paid for totally by this county. The Administrative Office of the Courts has granted money of this nature to other counties, but as of yet, today, we have not received approval for any grant monies from the court. So in order for me to be able to proceed in some way, that was the proposal I had made to the executive staff back in August to say we could at least start with something to get it underway. If you've been to my office, you can see the number of paper files that we have. That doesn't count all the paper files that we have in the dark and scary basement. We've received a quote from an outside, actually 2 outside companies now, that talk about the expense of this project. If we don't start, we're basically going to continue the process that has been made by my predecessors, which is to do nothing and just allow the paper to accumulate. It's bad for the courthouse, it's bad for patrons who are trying to get information from these files. It's something that we haven't addressed either in terms of actual storage or in terms of preservation of the records. Digitization also includes microfilm records. The microfilm records that we have now are of an age that they are going to physically start disintegrating unless we are able to make that transfer from microfilm to the digital records. And we just can't allow that to happen. Those are official records of the court, just like the paper is, and just like our electronic system is. Microfilm records come from a period where the county was starting to switch over into more technology-based systems, but these were made prior to that time. And they're just very old and about to crumble up. So does that answer your question? In my proposal, just so you know the numbers, and I say this in the memo too, I think, I had proposed $200,000 to start the digitization process, and then another $45,000 in a separate proposal to pay for a contract agency to come in and assist us with the digitization process.
Jenny.
My understanding with the budget process, and please correct me if I'm wrong on how this went down, was the flat budget proposed was what we have in our funds currently. The wish projects above that was what we would potentially have income for if we had passed the public safety sales tax and would have had income to divert from other sources because we would have money for projects, I guess, if that's how I understood I didn't realize that we had given the go-ahead for the above and beyond projects.
We haven't said anything about the above and beyond projects, so you're right about that. The only thing I would add to that is there is also still ARP money available, and so as you remember, we were encouraged to submit a list of potential needs to the executive staff for needs of our office. And in fact, we kind of did a combo thing for the courthouse. So we actually did that sometime in January. So that's where we are now. And you're exactly right, that the problem that we face now from my office is we're kind of in that limbo area. The request is sitting there, but the need is still there. I didn't get the grant money from AOIC, like none of it, but the project needs to start because we can't just let it continue to sit there and not do it. The longer it takes, the more expensive it's going to be. And the quotes, as you said, are pretty high just to do all the stuff that's upstairs, not even the dark and scary basement.
JJ and then Stephanie.
Oops, thank you. I'd like to make an amendment to the budget transfer, change the amount to $255,994.52. That's 255,994.52. That comes from the circuit clerk's memo.
It does.
There's a motion on the floor to amend. Is there a second? Second. Okay, we second. Jen. We have a motion and a second to amend. Any discussion? Stephanie.
So I'll support this. So I guess just to kind of to explain to you like where I'm coming from is the board has a vested interest that the revenues that are received in a year are recorded in the year. That's not a big ask, that's not a heavy ask, that's not a heavy lift. It's a reasonable ask. The board also, you're not the only digitization project. I think digitization is incredibly important. We've spent quite a lot of money on digitization, and we fully intend to continue to do so. The thing is, the way the budget works is we hear from all of the elected officials. We try as hard. I think I have a really good record of trying as hard as I can to get to yes, right? And then if we have a revenue that overperforms, which this is the case, right? This revenue overperformed our estimates. Typically what happens is I get a call from that elected official and it's like, hey, this revenue overperformed. Here's what I'm thinking. Like, I wanna try to retain some of this in this special fund, right? Because X, Y, and Z. This is what I'm thinking. And then we have a conversation at the board level about how we are going to appropriate those extra revenues or how we're not, how we're gonna just let them sit in a fund balance in order to beef it up, right? And that's like a conversation that happens. You know, the memo that we have from the circuit clerk says that $255,994.52 of the appropriation, they're in agreement that that can be transferred. It's just like which year. So I think, and I totally appreciate that different offices have different pressures, and I will fully admit that the circuit clerk's office, in terms of some of the way that their funding comes in, is hard, right? But there's no I mean, if we know we have the revenue, we need to record it on the year that it was received. It makes it really hard for us to budget, especially with this kind of fund that's so much in flux. If we have to remember, oh, but yeah, $250,000 of that 2025 was really 2020, right? Like, we need to have a sense of like trends over time. As I said last time, there's a lot of eyes on this fund because this is some of this stuff is like caught up in cash bail, and there's like a lot of conversation about that. So for a lot of different reasons, and because part of our responsibility is transparency to the public, right? The public, they'll look at our budget, and there's not gonna be a paragraph that is like, hey, this is what really happened in this year. So our goal is always to get revenue and expenses. And actually, this is usually where I have the hardest time, is like somebody tries to buy something at the end of the year and the van can't get here in time. And, you see this in highway a lot, and, no fault of their own, but like, if it's possible, we want revenues and expenses, right, to go where on the year that they are. So we could do this transfer, that's cool, and then that $100,000 that we don't move would sit in those special revenue funds fund balance, until which time this board with a 15 vote majority would vote to appropriate it into the budget. Because no elected official can just spend money if it's received, right? And I think not even a dollar. Even if the clerk, and I really appreciate your efforts to get these grants, and sorry that you weren't able to, but like, even if any elected official gets $1, right, in grant revenue, they can't spend it until we appropriate it. So we can then have a more robust conversation about whether it makes sense to use this $100,000 for the digitization project, if it makes better sense to put it on ARPA and use some of this in order to relieve some of the more day-to-day operation things, like which pot of money, right? Nobody's saying that we don't want to do digitization, but we're also saying we're in a moment where the economic sort of forecast of the county, as we know, is not great, right? And so, but I'll support the memo. I'll support the amendment from JJ, and we could just have a conversation about that other $100,000, which will just be sitting in a special revenue fund balance, at some time where we have more time. And then the other thing I just want to make abundantly clear, everybody from the budget office is very detailedly aware for each of these funds how they could be spent. That was, when I say that there was hours of conversation with Matt Bannock from the state's attorney's office, who gave us a comprehensive set of detailed information about the appropriate use of those funds. And these funds will be spent in that way, just like any of the other funds that we have, right? Would be spent according to the statutory requirements of those funds, and they would be tracked as they should be, right? And I have a lot of confidence in that between the budget office and the auditor's office and how we track funds, that to make sure that the expenses are allowable under each of these fund statutory requirements.
Further discussion? All right, go ahead, Matt. You're up next, Brett.
I had a question just on I know we're taking the number from the memo here. Do other numbers need to be adjusted to reflect this change on the amendment?
Yes, they would.
And if so, how are we?
May I respond to that? Mr. Sollard, you're right about that. That the appropriation would have to change in the transfer. And actually, Ms. Hanover Friedman and Travis and I have an appointment set up tomorrow afternoon at 3, where we were going to have some further discussion about this action had the board voted in favor of transferring the entire $355,000. So I think when we have our conversation tomorrow, we can sort out where the money comes from. I had actually sent an email prior to both Mr. Woodcock and Ms. Hanover Friedman to say, here's where the $255,000 would come from. I don't have that email with me, but we know what funds it would come from.
Can I follow up on that, Steve?
Go ahead.
Just to clarify, I'm not sure with whom, but does this amendment need to reflect all of those little changes in order? So do we have those numbers that we could put into this amendment? Because I don't think it makes sense right now to amend the bottom number without amending the pieces that would go into it.
Mr. Sollard, I think I have the email in my phone. If I can have just a minute, I think I can tell you where it comes from, because most of it's going to be from op-admin.
Steve, Michelle,
Go ahead, Michelle.
Yeah, I don't have anything helpful. I have a question to add to the pile. So, this is the first I've heard of holding money aside for digitization, so I did not come prepared to speak on that. But we had gotten a quote and rolled into the ARPA digitization project, the circuit clerk's office. So is this the same digitization and we should not pay with ARPA, or I'm confused at what the board direction is on that piece? I'm asking because we're in the middle of that contract and we're making payments, so.
Oh, let me be clear. I was not suggesting that this board is saying we're holding back this $100,000 for digitization. I was saying we would hold back the $100,000 so we could have a conversation about it someday. Like, no, but no.
But we're doing the digitization now.
What do you mean, we're doing it now?
We're doing the circuit clerk digitization now. From the original request that the clerk put forward for the 25 budget.
Right.
We met with her at that point and rolled it into the ARPA digitization project. Again, I did not know this was going to be the content of the conversation, so I have not looked at those documents recently, but I believe that is what she's talking about now is what is being done in the digitization project now. That the contract that goes through the end of 26 with Fiddler that we are actively in and paying from ARPA.
Is this a separate digitization project from the thing that has already been funded?
I have heard absolutely nothing about monies for Fiddler for our digitization needs. So I don't know how much money has been set aside, and I don't know what it's for. And here's the thing. I'm the custodian of the funds, so I have to approve how the money is transferred. The reason that I want to have this conversation with Mr. Woodcock and Ms. Hanover Freeman tomorrow is to say we need to have some kind of a written document that says how we're going to handle all of this. And it may be that we say we're not going to use it for digitization because the county has sufficient ARPA funds to pay for it. I'm not sure that they do. But if it's not for that, it could be for another purpose that supports the needs of my office. And that's what the statute says about these funds. They are supposed to be used for the support of the office. Unfortunately, as you've correctly identified, Ms. Furtado, the fees that we used to receive are not the fees that we're receiving now. The bail bond money is gone. People who are represented by the public defender don't have to pay fines and fees in criminal cases anymore. People that have traffic cases don't pay their fines and fees because they get to keep their license. They could have 500 unpaid cases and it wouldn't matter. They're just not paying the money. The Supreme Court is looking at, although they haven't made a final decision, on civil filing fees as well, to make some determination as to whether they're too high and that they should be reduced. So I think we're all trying to look at the big picture here of what we're going to do and what happens when these fees that are paid into my office start drying up, which is what's been happening over the last 2 years. But I think our conversation might be able to identify what some of the other needs are in addition to digitization. That word is going to kill me, I swear.
Member Cagle.
I'll yield to Ms. Long.
Okay, go ahead.
Susan, thank you. I can't say the word Marlboro without really thinking it through, so it'll be the slowest word you'll ever hear me say. I think I found the numbers in an email that I was copied on. So I'm going to read what you'll recognize as your words. I'm therefore going to ask the board in March, so this is just before March, to approve the budget amendment to increase appropriations in our special funds and increase revenue in the general fund as follows. 1080-130 child support enforcement, 0. 2613-030 child support services, 1,000. 2630-030, clerk op / admin, 204,994.52 cents. 2671-030, clerk doc storage, 50,000. Does that sound right?
That's right.
Okay, so that's what you were going to ask us for next month. So if we just vote on this tonight, this is all acceptable.
That's correct.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you for finding the email.
Mr. Franny.
What was the $1,000 one?
So it is 2613-030, child support services. So child support enforcement is just $0. Child support services is $1,000. Clerk op / admin is 204,994.52 cents. Clerk doc and storage is 50,000.
Sorry, Jeff, I stepped over you. Go ahead.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm on a couple pages here. I'm aligning with Member Solar because we want to change the total number without something in front of us to approve what the exact numbers are. And an email is not helping me because it's not in front of me as a resolution to approve. And then number two, I prefer to stick with the original resolution. What is the worst possible thing that could happen if we just say funds received and funds are recorded and we stick with the original resolution? What is the absolute worst thing that could happen? I don't think the world's going to fall apart. And I do believe that gives the clerk the option to come back under the 2025 fiscal budget to reconcile this. So what am I missing here?
Ellie.
So I've been trying to wrap my head around all of this as well, and I appreciate Susan and I did have a chance to talk today before this meeting. I guess I'm also similar to along the lines of your question, Jeff. If I understand this correctly, this is really just a question of funds being recorded in the proper year. And nobody's questioning how they will be used. All the legal restrictions on those funds will be respected regardless of which account they sit in. We're all bound by the same laws. So I guess I do have that question as well. What would be the difference of the $100,000? Because however you're going to want to use those funds, it will require discussion with the board, right? So what is the point of not moving them?
To answer Mr. Wilson's question and then to answer your question, I'm not going to approve a transfer of $355,000. That is the entire point of this memo, and that's why we were going to have a meeting tomorrow afternoon to discuss what we might be able to agree to.
But you would do a transfer of $255,000?
Yes, I would.
Okay, see, I didn't.
And that was the amendment that Mr. Farney had proposed.
Stephanie.
Can I ask why?
Pardon me?
Why?
I will not approve the transfer because we don't have a written agreement that says how the monies are going to be expended. I'm an elected official. I am not a department head. Mr. Woodhouse used the term sweeping the funds. There is no such thing in local government law for a non-home rule unit. You're not allowed to sweep my funds because I am the custodian of the fund. What I'm saying to you, and I said in my memo, is if you take the entire $355,000, you are hurting the operation of my office by taking that money. What you leave me with is fund balances only. And there is not sufficient money in the fund balances of those funds to do any more than what we are doing with our flat budget.
You're still on, Stephanie.
So the $355,000, how much of that is currently, this is 2024 money, right?
Yes.
So that 100,000 that we're talking about, is that appropriated in your budget?
Microphone, please.
Sorry, I thought it was on. The $100,000 is not appropriated in the budget, and it doesn't show in the revenue for the budget.
Right.
And that's because at the time we made the projection, as you remember, for the FY24 budget, this is what we projected that those funds would bring in. When I discovered, when we finally got the numbers for the fourth quarter of 2024, that there were additional revenues, that's when I contacted people to say, hey, we got additional revenues, and this is what I'm proposing that we do.
So if we don't move it now, you do understand this board has to appropriate it for you to spend it, correct?
Yes, I've been around long enough to know that that's the
Okay, I
case.
just want to make sure that that's very clear.
But I
second of
also
all,
want to make it clear.
Ms. Furtado has the floor right
no,
now,
yeah, go
please.
ahead.
I also want to make it clear in response to Ms. Furtado's statement, I do understand that the budget appropriation and expenditure would have to be amended. But I also understand that the board can't make me spend the money in a way that I don't think is appropriate. This all happened because we didn't talk about what was going to happen. We should not be at this point tonight. If we had talked about this prior to this being set up without my knowledge or permission, we wouldn't be here. We need to have conversation, and we need to have written agreement. It's just as simple as that. Conversation, as you said, absolutely makes total sense for this. But what I'm going to say is, and the reason I agreed to have a meeting tomorrow afternoon with Ms. Hanover Freeman and Mr. Woodcock, is I want that to be the beginning of the conversation about how we handle this. It cannot be a one-sided discussion.
Okay, so I just want to make sure I'm abundantly clear. I just want to make sure that I understand what you're saying. If this board tonight decides to not do to not do JJ's amendment and to do the full amount as Mr. Wilson stated, and appropriate that money, are you saying you wouldn't transfer any of it, or you would only transfer the 255 and you would not transfer the 100,000?
I will only transfer the 255, which is exactly what I said all along that I would do. Nobody ever approached me to say, you want more, and here's what we're going to use it for. So I'm not going to agree to the additional 100,000, and that's why we need to have the conversation. This is not something that the board can direct me to do. We need to have the conversation so that we agree on how this is going to be handled. And remember, we have quarterly transfers coming up this year too. So we need to be very clear, as you said, on how we're going to do all of this and what we're going to do. Because I don't think people necessarily understand, this is not money that I received from the county's general fund and I didn't spend it all. This is money that I received from user fees coming into the office. For one of the funds, it's money coming from the state, not as much as it used to be. And for the other funds, it's user fees. So the user fees are my custodial funds. That's why we need to have this agreement that says, what are we going to do with them?
Okay, I just want to make sure I'm kind of wrapping my head around this. So the difference would be if we transfer all of it, that you're not going to transfer it and it's going to sit in your special revenue fee funds. Or if we don't, it's just going to sit in your special revenue fund balance. So really what you're telling me is it kind of just doesn't matter which way we do it. And that regardless, either way, we'd have to have a conversation. If we transfer it all, and then you'd have a conversation, and if y'all could work it out and agree to what you're going to spend it on, then you would agree to transfer it, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter which fund the bills are paid from, right? Or Are you saying that you don't want this to go to 2024 expenses, and so for some reason you want to keep it in your special funds? Because that's, I guess, kind of what I'm trying to get at.
I don't object to having the $255,000 applied to 2024.
Right.
I think that's perfectly reasonable. And I understand what your position is on that issue. The reason I had concern about that is because the information from CLA that I received, and I did attach that to the information for the board tonight, was that we needed to make sure that any transfers that we made had those restrictions appropriately applied to them. But the 255, I think we agree on what we're going to do with that. So that I'm not concerned with. What I am concerned with is that we don't have an agreement on any further monies that the board is asking me to transfer. That's what I'm concerned about. You're right, there's a process here. I'm just asking that we establish the process so that there is an action taken by the board that doesn't involve me.
Okay.
I think Mr. Cagle was next, if he's still got the question. All right, sorry, go ahead. Sorry for the delay. Okay, Beth, sorry.
So I am also trying to wrap my head around this. This is money that came in fiscal year 2024. Yes or no? That's correct. Okay.
Sorry, that's correct.
This money was not appropriated to be spent on anything in fiscal year 2024, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. This money is supposed to be earmarked as a special fund that can only be spent on certain things within the restrictions of the fee statute.
Yes,
Okay.
and that
So are you worried that we are going to spend this and violate the statute?
What I'm worried about is that we don't have a process that we're following here and that you are going to take action without talking to me.
Okay.
The reason I suggested that we look at doing this in 2025 is because we would do exactly what Ms. Furtado was talking about, which is to amend the budget in terms of both appropriations and expenditures.
I don't believe we can amend the 2024 budget now, can we? Go ahead. Yeah. I'm yielding, yeah.
So here's the deal, right? We move fines and fees, some of them from these things, over to the general fund, and there's a whole smorgasbord of allowable expenditures, right? This doesn't even come close to addressing the needs that her office has that are allowable under these fees. The rest of it comes from the general fund. So the difference is, if we appropriate the full dollar amount, right, we would be able to provide relief to the general fund because we would then be applying an additional $100,000 to expenditures, right, that were funded by the general fund. They are allowable expenditures under the copious amounts of research that the state's attorney's office has provided outlining what we're allowed to spend all of these fines and fees on. And then we would close the books on 2024. And I will agree, we should do that in conversation with the person who brought in those funds, right? The difference is if we leave the $100,000 sitting in the special revenue funds, right, for 2024, it then is just in that fund balance. And it hasn't been used in order to offset core operational needs allowable under those appropriations in 2024, which is what we're talking about, which is fine because then we could have a conversation about that $100,000 and decide what to do with it and apply it to 2020, because we would then have to appropriate it in 2025. Effectively, what it would mean is that we are not showing $100,000 of revenue and expenditures for 2024, but I mean, I guess it's better than 355.
The problem, to answer your question, is with the $100,000. If it goes into an unrestricted fund, which is what this transfer would do, then the unrestricted fund does not have any attachment to it that says, and we're going to use the money for this. That's what I'm talking about with process.
But
So-
statute states that it cannot be spent on anything but that certain pocket.
Once
bucket.
it goes into the unrestricted fund, then I've given up my right to say that's where the money should go to. And that is what the,
Oh, did I turn it off? Sorry.
JJ.
If I could just clarify it for you, okay? What Susan is saying is that as soon as it leaves her money, her bank accounts, because these are separate bank accounts, and it goes to the general fund, those restrictions are gone. We do not have to spend it according to those restrictions when it's in the general fund. So the clerk is absolutely correct about that. If I could, I can clarify my amendment. And so if you want to look at your full amendment here.
Please do.
Okay. In the 1, 2, 3, 4, in the fifth paragraph where it starts with funds, 1080 general corporate, strike 2617 child support service. 2630 circuit clerk operations and administration stays. 2671 court document storage stays. 2613, you would need to add 2613 court automation. And I'll give all this to the recording secretary. When we move down to the actual transfers, transfer to account is 2613-030-700-101, transfers out, $1,000. Transfer from account is 2613-030-400-801, investment interest. Strike the entire line beginning with 2617. Strike the next line entirely, starting with 2617. Strike the next line starting with 2630. The second 2630 line is correct. Strike the next line, 2630. The next line, 2671-030-70001-101, transfers out. Dollar amount changes to $38,152.27. Next line, 2671-030-700-101, transfers out. That dollar amount is $11,847.73. The sum of those two lines is $50,000. Those transfers then amount to $255,994.52. Then moving to the last section, we will strike the entire first line. The second line, the dollar amount will change to $204,994.52. The third line, the dollar amount will change to $50,000. And then we will add a line, 1080-030-600-101, transfers in $1,000. Transfer from account 2613-030-700-101, transfers out. That sum then equals $255,994.52, and I would like to call the question.
Mr. Wilson, does that give you enough information to be able to understand the resolution change that JJ's proposed?
Yes, it does, except for, unfortunately, I'm not remembering all the numbers that JJ wrote. And here's what I would like Mr. Forney to do. He can mark up his one sheet of paper, make a copy of it, and pass it all around unless everyone else is remembering the same numbers that I don't remember. You're very good at this, I am not. I feel a little squeezy, maybe not totally 100% there. I'm not seeing it in writing, and that's my preference. Am I amiss by asking for it to be in writing so I could see it?
JJ?
I'm texting it to you right now.
Mr. Cagle?
Do we need a second for JJ's call to motion? question?
Yes, we do need a second. Are you seconding that?
Yes, sir.
We have a motion and a second to call the question. Let's wait on that until we get this sent. Michelle?
I just, point of order, we haven't voted on calling the question, right? Okay. Okay. I just want to clarify something about the budget process. And I will be very upfront. I'm very personally invested in the budget process because I've had to do it for 2 years. So I get very sticky when I feel like it's not being represented correctly. All of these transfers are from special funds to the general fund. That's not new. That's not different. And the reason is because the expenses are in the general fund. The expenses are not in the special funds. So we are absolutely abiding by the statute and the restrictions on the money when we move it from the special fund to the general fund that's within the circuit clerk's budget, and then we pay the expenses out of that fund. That's how all of the funds have been going, or how the transfers have been going. That's how we do it for all departments, because it's an accounting nightmare to have expenses duplicated in every single fund. We don't want to do that. The agreement is the budget. So this written request of an agreement is the budget. It's the budget amendment in front of you. There is a written agreement. And when we're talking about this extra $100,000 and what would it be spent on, it would be spent on the same things that all of the other transfers have been spent on, because we know those are allowable expenses, and because the special funds revenue isn't enough to offset all of those costs. There's still plenty of additional costs that the general fund is covering. So I just want to clarify those 3 points because I feel like they're getting a little muddy.
Brett?
Can I get a point of clarification? I'm not going to ask a question. That's fine. That still falls in the rules. And Ms. McGrath, you agree with JJ's amendment, correct? Okay, I just want to make sure, yeah.
To answer Mr. Pugh's question, I'm looking at it right now, but these are exactly the numbers, as he said, that were in the email that I had circulated. Thank you, Mr. Farney.
All right, Jeff, are you satisfied? Are you comfortable with the information provided?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. All right, we have
Can I? Is the money that does not get transferred into the general fund still considered as part of fiscal year 2024?
Yeah, it'll just show up as revenue. It'll stay in the general funds, and it'll just fall into their fund the special fund balances.
But it will be recorded in 2024?
Yeah, it'll be recorded just as just unappropriated revenue.
Okay.
All right, seeing no further questions. All in favor of calling the question, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. All in favor of adoption of the amended resolution 2025-65, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same.
It's roll call.
Oh, excuse me, this is a roll call. Requires 15 votes. My apologies.
Sorry, for the amendment.
Oh, that's right. All right. We've made a voice, all in favor of have a voice vote on approval of the amended resolution. All in favor, please signify by saying, excuse me, of the amendment, sorry. In favor of the amendment to the resolution. Aye. All right. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. All right, we have an amended resolution now. All in favor of adoption of the resolution, will the clerk please call the roll? We need 15 votes.
Coert,
Yes.
Esri,
Yes.
Farney.
Yes.
Fava,
Yes.
Furtado, Greer,
Yes.
Hanauer Friedman,
Yes.
Lakshin,
Yes.
Pugh,
Yes.
Rodriguez,
Yes.
Sexton, Storr,
Yes.
Sollard,
Yes.
Thorsland,
Yes.
Vanish Theranot,
Yes.
Wiggs,
Yes.
Wilson,
Yes.
Cagle,
Yes.
Carter,
Yes.
Locke.
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you very much. As we have no further business, the meeting is adjourned.
How you been?
I've been good, and yourself?
All righty.